Hello, my name is Colton McAllister, 33 years old. I live in Berlin, in a quiet corner of the city where cobblestone streets and old-fashioned cafes seem to never rush. I work in the field of artificial intelligence research, a job that demands focus and patience, qualities I've honed during my years away from home. Home? What a strange word. My home used to be the sprawling fields of Colorado where cold winds swept through snow-capped mountains, but now it's a small apartment with windows overlooking the Spree River. I left Colorado 12 years ago at the age of 21, carrying a suitcase full of clothes and a heart heavy with wounds. Today, I'm returning. Not out of homesickness, but because my grandfather, the only person in the family who still tied me to the McAllister name, has passed away. I'm sitting on a flight from Berlin to Denver, gazing out the airplane window where fluffy white clouds drift lazily, like memories I've tried to bury. My grandfather, Earl McAllister, passed at 84, suddenly and unexpectedly, as if he chose to leave without troubling anyone. I can still hear his warm, gravelly voice, the way he sat in his old armchair in the mountain cabin, recounting stories of his youth when the McAllister family was just a small general store in Aspen before it grew into a real estate and hotel empire. He was the only one in the family who didn't see me as a failure. But now he's gone, and I'm returning to say my final goodbye. As the plane lands, I feel the biting cold of Colorado seeping through my thin coat. I didn't bring much, just a small backpack and a simple black suit for the funeral. Denver's airport is bustling, but I feel out of place amidst the crowd. A rental car is waiting, and I drive straight to Aspen, where the entire McAllister family is gathering at the estate, a grand mansion nestled in the valley, its glass walls gleaming under the sunlight as if flaunting the family's wealth. I don't want to be here. 12 years ago, when I left, my father, Dean McAllister, called me a quitter, a son who wasn't strong enough to carry the family name. My older brother, Troy, sneered and said I'd regret turning my back on the chance to be a millionaire. I didn't argue. I just wanted to escape the fights, the disdainful looks, and the pressure to live the life the family expected. But now, driving through these familiar roads, old memories flood back sharp as a blade. The McAllister estate looms before me, resplendent like a palace. Marble columns, intricately carved bronze statues, and a meticulously tended garden. All of it seems to scream that I don't belong here. I step out of the car, my breath forming white puffs in the cold air. My suit feels out of place among the expensive outfits of my relatives, who are already gathering at the gate. I recognize a few faces, aunts, uncles, cousins, known to me only vaguely through gossip and stories. They look at me whispering, and I can feel their scrutinizing gazes as if I'm an outsider. "Colton?" A voice cuts through, cold and sharp. I turn to face my father. Dean McAllister, 60 years old, still carries an air of authority with his silver hair slicked back and a perfectly tailored suit. His eyes meet mine, devoid of warmth. "I didn't think you'd show up." "I'm here to say goodbye to Grandpa," I reply, trying to keep my voice steady. My father's lips curl into a sardonic half-smile. "Say goodbye? Or did you catch a whiff of money?" His voice is low but cutting. "Don't think I don't know what you're after, Colton. You left for 12 years, not once checking in, and now you drag yourself back here. Don't even dream of getting a share of the inheritance." I don't respond. I'm used to the way he talks, the way he assumes everyone is driven by money and power. But his words still sting like an old wound reopened. I quietly step past him, entering the mansion. Inside, the air is heavy with the scent of lilies and hushed whispers. Relatives and guests cluster in groups, their lavish dresses and expensive wine glasses painting a picture of opulence. But all I see is pretense. "Colton," another voice, this time Troy, my older brother. He strides toward me, tall and imposing, his blonde hair slicked back with gel. His suit probably worth my month's salary. "The prodigal little brother returns," he says, his tone laced with mockery. "I bet you're here to see what Grandpa left you, huh? Don't get your hopes up. I heard he left you that mountain shack, no hot water, by the way." He laughs loudly and a few people around him chuckle as if I'm the punchline. I clench my fists in my pockets, fighting to keep my anger in check. I don't care about the will, I say evenly. I just want to say goodbye to him. Troy raises an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. Whatever you say, he shrugs, then turns back to his conversation with a group of guests. I stand there in the vast room feeling like I'm on an alien planet. The glances, the whispers. They all remind me I don't belong here. The funeral is held the next day in a grand hall adorned with white wreaths and photos of my grandfather. He looks dignified in the large portrait at the center of the room, his bright eyes and gentle smile just as I remember. I sit in the back row trying not to draw attention. My father and Troy stand at the front playing the role of perfect heirs, delivering eulogies about Grandpa that I know are hollow. They talk about the McAllister legacy and his vision, but no one mentions the mornings he spent with me on the cabin porch telling stories of his youth as a poor boy working tirelessly to build a family. When the ceremony ends, I stand before his coffin, placing a white daisy, his favorite flower, on the wooden lid. "Thank you," I whisper, my voice choking. "Thank you for always believing in me." I'm not sure if he hears me, but in that moment I feel like he's still out there somewhere, watching me with the same warm eyes as before. That night, I stay at a small hotel on the outskirts of Aspen, unwilling to remain in the stifling mansion despite my father's invitation, or rather his command. Lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind is flooded with memories of Grandpa. He was the only one who kept in touch after I left. His handwritten letters sent to Berlin, his brief Christmas calls, and the last time we spoke when he whispered over the phone, his voice frail but cryptic. "Colton, there are things in this family that aren't what they seem. If I'm ever gone, remember the mountain cabin. It'll give you the answers." The mountain cabin, the shack, Troy mocked. I don't know what Grandpa wanted me to find there, but his words echo in my mind like a puzzle waiting to be solved. I close my eyes, trying to push away the growing unease in my chest. After the will reading tomorrow, I'll head to the mountain. I don't know what I'll find, but one thing I know for sure. Grandpa never did anything without a purpose. The next morning, I wake up in the small hotel room on the outskirts of Aspen, where the early sunlight filters through the curtains, casting faint streaks of light across the wooden floor. I didn't sleep last night. Memories of my grandfather, his words over the phone 2 years ago, keep mingling with the mocking laughter of my father and Troy in my mind. I stand before the mirror, straightening my simple black dress shirt and pulling on a thin sweater. I don't want to look like them. The expensive suits, the glittering watches, the fake smiles. I just want to be myself, even if that makes me feel more out of place than ever. The will reading is held at the family's law firm, a sleek modern glass building in downtown Aspen where polished walls and leather furniture exude the scent of money. I drive there feeling like I'm stepping into an arena. As I push open the heavy glass door, a blast of cold air hits my face, sending a shiver down my spine. Inside, the family is already gathered, clustered in small groups, whispering like vultures waiting to divide their share. My father, Dean McAllister, sits at the head of the conference table, exuding authority like a king. Troy, my older brother, stands nearby, chatting with a distant aunt whose name I can't recall, his smug smile gleaming as brightly as the Armani suit he's wearing. I choose a seat in the corner of the room, near a window overlooking the distant mountains. The snow-capped peaks remind me of my grandfather's mountain cabin where I once felt at peace. Here, in this room, I feel only suffocation. Eyes glance my way, some curious, some scornful. I overhear a whisper from a group of relatives nearby. "Is that the youngest one? Looks like a wage slave." I don't care. I'm used to being looked down upon. The family's lawyer, Harold Grayson, enters the room carrying a thick stack of documents and an old leather briefcase. He's a man in his 60s with silver hair and gold-rimmed glasses, his voice low and monotonous like a machine. He nods to everyone, his gaze briefly flickering over me before settling on my father. "Thank you all for coming," Grayson begins, placing the documents on the table. Today we will announce the final will of Mr. Earl McAllister, executed on March 15th of last year. The room falls silent save for the rustle of papers and the faint breathing of those trying to suppress their eagerness. My heart beats faster, not because I expect anything from the will, but because of what my grandfather said before he passed. His words over the phone, about the cabin, about the truth, loop in my mind like an unforgettable melody. Grayson starts reading, his voice clear in the hushed room. Mr. Earl McAllister, as the testator, declares that his entire share in the McAllister Corporation, valued at approximately $150 million, along with properties in Aspen, Denver, and Unveil, shall be transferred to his son Dean McAllister and his grandson Troy McAllister to be divided equally. A smattering of applause breaks out, not too loud but enough to signal approval. My father nods, his eyes glinting with satisfaction as if he'd anticipated this. Troy's smirk widens and he turns to clap a nearby uncle on the shoulder, as if celebrating a major victory. Other relatives murmur and nod, some raising their wine glasses in a toast. I sit still, my hands clasped tightly, feeling like I'm watching a play in which I have no part. And, Grayson continues, his voice hesitating slightly as if he knows the next part will stir controversy. To Colton McAllister, Mr. Earl bequeaths the mountain cabin near the Wyoming border along with all its contents. The room erupts in laughter, not joyful but the kind of sharp mocking laughter that feels like a blade. It's as if the whole family had been waiting for this moment to unleash their disdain on me. An aunt, vaguely recalled as Uncle Roger's wife, speaks loudly enough for all to hear. "That shack's probably not even worth a used car." The laughter swells louder now, like a crashing wave. Troy turns to me, his grin radiant. "I told you, Colton. Grandpa left you the mountain shed. Planning to fix it up and open a hotel?" I don't respond. I just look at him, keeping my face expressionless. But inside, my blood is boiling, not because of the cabin, whose value I don't care about, but because of how they treat my grandfather's legacy, turning it into a joke. I remember summers at that cabin when Grandpa taught me to fish, to build a fire, to listen to the wind in the forest. That cabin wasn't a shack. It was where I felt loved, understood. And now it's the only thing he left me. Grayson clears his throat, trying to regain attention. "That concludes the main provisions of the will," he says, closing the documents. "If there are no questions, we'll end here." My father stands, adjusting his suit jacket. "No questions," he says coldly. "Thank you, Harold." He brushes past me, his gaze as if I don't exist. Troy follows, tossing me a haughty glance. The other relatives file out, leaving me alone in the vast room with Grayson. I stand and approach him. "Mr. Grayson," I say, my voice low but firm, "can I see the will?" He raises an eyebrow, slightly surprised. "Are you sure, Colton? It's quite clear already." "I just want to see it," I reply, keeping my voice steady. Grayson sighs and slides the documents toward me. I flip through the pages, my eyes scanning the dry text. Everything is as he read. $150 million, the properties and control of the corporation go to my father and Troy. The cabin goes to me. Nothing unexpected. But when I reach the signature page, my heart skips a beat. My grandfather's signature, bold and decisive, feels off. I'm no expert, but I've seen his signature countless times in the letters he sent me. This one, it looks slightly different, as if written by a trembling hand. Or am I imagining it? "Are you all right, Colton?" Grayson's voice pulls me back to reality. "I'm fine," I say, returning the documents. "Thank you." I leave the office, my mind reeling. On my way to the car, I hear Troy call out behind me. "Hey, Colton, if you need someone to fix that roof, give me a call. I know some cheap contractors." His laughter echoes as I don't turn back. I get in the car, slam the door, and drive off. On the way back to the hotel, I can't stop thinking about Grandpa's words. Only when they think they've won does the truth really matter. That sentence cuts through my mind like a knife. The cabin isn't just a sentimental gift. It must hold something, a secret, an answer, a truth he wanted me to uncover. I tighten my grip on the steering wheel, feeling like I'm standing at a fateful crossroads. Tomorrow I'll head to the mountain. The truth about what Grandpa was hiding will come to light. That morning I woke before dawn. I left the hotel as the first light of the sun began to creep over the mountains. The biting cold stung my skin, my breath forming white puffs in the still air. I drove through the winding roads leading out of Aspen, the sunrise painting the sprawling grasslands golden, making them shimmer like a canvas. The scent of pine and forest earth drifted through the cracked window, pulling me back to childhood summers when I was a skinny boy trailing after my grandfather on the trails to the mountain cabin. That cabin, the shack Troy mocked, was where I once felt I truly belonged. When I was 10, I sat in the passenger seat of my grandfather's old pickup truck. He drove, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the window, whistling a tune I could never name. "Colton," he once said, his voice low and steady, "a man isn't measured by the money in his pocket, but by what he leaves behind for the world." I nodded, not fully grasping it then, but his eyes, bright, serious, and full of faith in me, made me feel important. Unlike my father, who always looked at me with disappointment, or Troy, who saw me as a rival to be crushed. The cabin lies deep in a sparse forest near the Wyoming border, where towering pines block the sun, casting dappled patterns of light and shadow on the ground. It's not a grand house, just a simple log structure with a weathered shingle roof, a small front porch, and a few worn-out armchairs. But to me, it was paradise. Every summer my grandfather brought me there, just the two of us. No father, no Troy, no arguments about money or power. There I could be myself, a boy who loved reading books, sketching birds in the sky, and listening to Grandpa's stories. Once he took me fishing at a nearby stream. I clumsily dropped my rod into the water, and the biggest fish we'd ever seen got away. I cried, not for the fish, but because I thought I'd let him down. But he just laughed and ruffled my hair. "Colton," he said, "failure isn't losing a fish. Failure is when you stop trying." Then he taught me how to tie a hook again, patiently guiding me step by step until I got it right. That was the first time I felt I could accomplish something, even if it was small. But Grandpa wasn't always gentle. He could be stern, sometimes intimidatingly so. Once I tried climbing a tall pine to reach a bird's nest, ignoring his warning. I fell, scraping myself raw, and he didn't speak to me for the rest of the afternoon. That evening, he sat beside me on the porch, handing me a mug of hot cocoa. "Do you know why I didn't want you climbing that tree?" he asked. I shook my head, still scared. "Because I don't want to lose you, Colton. This family has lost too much to mistakes. I don't want you to be one of them." His words stuck with me, though I didn't fully understand them then. Now, as I drive the winding trails up the mountain, the sunrise filtering through the trees, I wonder what mistakes he meant. Grandpa never shared details, but I always sensed a shadow in his voice, as if he carried a burden no one else knew. I know the McAllister family isn't just a business empire. There are secrets, hidden corners that Grandpa kept locked away. And now, with him gone, I feel like I'm walking a tightrope toward a truth I'm not sure I'm ready to face. The road up the mountain narrows, flanked by towering pines standing like sentinels. The sunrise fades as I venture deeper into the forest where the canopy blocks the light. I stop at a small gas station where an elderly man sits behind the counter reading a newspaper. He looks up, eyeing me curiously. "Where are you headed so early?" he asks, his voice raspy. "Up the mountain," I reply, paying for a can of water and some energy bars. "The cabin near the Wyoming border." He raises an eyebrow. "Earl McAllister's place? Haven't seen anyone up there in a while. Watch yourself. Roads are slick this season." I nod, thank him, and return to the car. I turn onto the trail leading to the cabin, the tires crunching over gravel. The faint morning light pierces the canopy, illuminating the cabin as it comes into view. A dark, quiet silhouette in the forest. It looks smaller than I remember, the roof sagging slightly, some wooden planks peeling. I park, turn off the engine, and sit in the dim morning light, listening to the chirping birds and the wind rustling through the trees. My heart pounds, not from fear, but from the sense that I'm standing before a door to the past and the future. I step out of the car, my breath forming white clouds in the cold air. The backpack on my shoulder holds a few essentials: a flashlight, a small knife, and a notebook I always carry for jotting down thoughts. The cabin's wooden door creaks as I push it open. Inside, the smell of old wood and dust hits me. I switch on the flashlight, its beam revealing familiar objects. The wooden table where Grandpa used to write letters, the frayed armchair where I once fell asleep, and a crooked landscape painting on the wall. Standing in the middle of the room, it feels like time has stood still. Everything is as it was when I left, yet something feels different. An eerie sensation, as if the cabin has been waiting for me. I recall the times Grandpa brought me here, showing me how to check the plumbing, how to fix a leaky pipe. A man has to know how to take care of himself, he used to say. And now, I wonder if he was preparing me for this moment, the moment I'd have to face the truth he kept hidden. The soft light of dawn filtered through the gaps in the tattered window curtains, casting a faint glow on the dusty wooden floor. The cabin looked desolate, like an old friend long forgotten. The wooden walls were peeling, cobwebs draped the corners of the ceiling, and a faint, musty smell hung in the air. But when I flipped the light switch, the ceiling bulb clicked and flickered to life, weak but steady. I turned on the kitchen faucet, and cold water flowed smoothly without a single drip. Grandpa had kept this place functional, despite no one visiting for months. That only strengthened my conviction that he had prepared everything for this day. I walked around the small living room, the flashlight beam sweeping across every corner. Everything was familiar. The wooden table where Grandpa used to write letters, the frayed armchair where I once dozed off, and the landscape painting on the wall, slightly crooked as if trying to catch my attention. I paused before the painting, a memory flashing back. 10 years ago, while helping Grandpa clean, he had carefully taken it down, wiped the wooden frame, and hung it back up. "Keep it safe," he said, his voice serious. At the time, I thought he just cherished the painting. But now, a gut feeling made my heart race. I stepped closer and lifted the painting off the wall. It was heavier than I remembered, the old wooden frame sturdy. I turned it over and my heart seemed to stop when I saw a brown envelope taped to the back. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, Grandpa's handwriting clear under the flashlight's beam. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Beneath the floor, everything I've left for you, and for the truth." His words hit like a knife, sharp and cold. I knelt on the floor, setting the painting aside, my eyes fixed on the moldy rug in the corner of the bedroom. It was old and tattered, but lay perfectly flat, as if hiding something. I pulled it back, revealing a small wooden trapdoor nearly blending into the floor. An old mechanical lock gleamed as if recently polished. I tried a few combinations, Grandpa's birthday, my birthday, but none worked. Then I remembered, 1965, the year he built this cabin. I turned the dials, my heart pounding. A click sounded and the trapdoor sprang open. I lifted the lid, the flashlight illuminating a small compartment. Inside was an old metal safe, a small wooden box, and a few ancient cassette tapes. I pulled them out, placing them on the floor, feeling like I was opening Pandora's box. The wooden box held leather-bound journals filled with Grandpa's handwriting. Next to it was a thick envelope containing neatly stacked documents and a handwritten will, the ink fresh as if written just months ago. I opened the safe with the same code, 1965, and found a stack of confidential files, more cassette tapes, and a small USB drive. My heart raced so fiercely I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I sat cross-legged on the floor, my hands shaking as I opened the first journal. Grandpa's words emerged, strong yet laced with pain. He wrote about the early days of building the McAllister Corporation, about fierce competitors, and then a secret that chilled me to the bone. In 1982, I made an unforgivable mistake. To save the company, I hired someone to eliminate Charles Hennigan, a rival threatening to destroy us. No one knew except Dean and Troy. They uncovered the truth 10 years ago and have used it to control me ever since. I stopped reading, feeling the floor beneath me give way. Grandpa, the man I admired who taught me about honesty and resilience, had committed a crime. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick. I turned to the next page, and what he wrote shocked me further. My father, Dean, and my brother, Troy, not only knew about his crime, but used it to force him to draft a will in their favor. They threatened to expose the truth, ruining his reputation and the McAllister family if he didn't transfer all his assets to them. But Grandpa didn't fully surrender. He wrote, "I know I can't undo the past, but I can protect the future. I've gathered evidence of what Dean and Troy are doing, laundering money through real estate projects, embezzling company funds, and misusing assets for personal gain. I've hidden it here in this cabin, so one day Colton will find it. You are my last hope, Colton. You're the only one I trust." I set the journal down, my hands trembling so much I could barely hold it. I opened the confidential files revealing detailed documents, forged contracts, manipulated accounting ledgers, and printed emails showing my father and Troy funneling millions into offshore accounts. There were memos about secret meetings with shady partners I'd never heard of. Each page was a piece of a puzzle revealing an empire built on deceit. I picked up a cassette tape labeled Recording 3/2024. I found an old cassette player in the corner, dusty but functional. When I pressed play, my father's voice came through, cold and sharp. "You're old, Dad. Don't fight us. If you don't sign the new will, we'll make sure the world knows how you killed Hennigan." Troy's voice cut in, mocking. "You think Colton's gonna save you? He's just a failure holed up in some European backwater." Then Grandpa's voice, frail but resolute. "You can take the money, but you can't take the truth." The tape stopped and the room fell silent. I sat there, feeling like the world was crumbling. Grandpa had spent his final years under duress, manipulated by his own son and grandson. But he didn't give up. He quietly gathered evidence, not just to atone for his crime, but to protect me, the one he believed would do the right thing. I opened the handwritten will dated 7 months ago. His handwriting was shaky, but his intent was clear. "I, Earl McAllister, declare that all my assets, including my shares in the McAllister Corporation and all properties, shall be transferred to my grandson, Colton McAllister. This is my final wish, superseding all prior wills." Below was his signature, but it wasn't notarized. He hadn't had time to finalize it before he passed. I sat in the cold cabin, clutching the journal tightly. I felt angry, heartbroken and proud all at once. Angry at what my father and Troy had done to Grandpa. Heartbroken over the crime he committed, whatever the reason. And proud that he chose me, even though I never thought I was worthy. I looked out the window where the dawn now shone brightly, glinting off the dew-covered pines. I knew I stood at a crossroads. Stay silent to protect Grandpa's last shred of reputation, or expose the truth and tear down the family's mask. I stuffed the documents, tapes, and will into my backpack, locked the safe, and stood up. The cabin suddenly felt alive, as if whispering, "You've found it. Now what will you do?" I didn't have an answer yet. But I knew one thing. From this moment, there was no turning back. What I found beneath the trapdoor, the journals, confidential files, cassette tapes, and handwritten will, wasn't just Grandpa's legacy. It was a bomb, powerful enough to demolish the McAllister empire and everything my family built over decades. But it was also a curse, forcing me to face a choice I was never prepared for. Stay silent to preserve Grandpa's final reputation, or reveal the truth and rip away the hypocrisy of my father and Troy. I left the cabin, closing the door behind me, the creak of the hinges echoing like a reminder of the place's age. I got into the car, placed the backpack on the passenger seat, and sat there, staring through the windshield. The pine trees stood tall in the early light, silent witnesses to the secret I had just uncovered. I started the engine but didn't drive off immediately. I needed time to think, to grasp what I was facing. On the way back to the hotel, my mind was in turmoil. Images of Grandpa flashed vividly, his gentle smile, sharp eyes, and warm voice as he told stories by the fireplace. He was the man I respected most, the only one in the family who believed in me. But he was also the man who committed an unforgivable crime, orchestrating the elimination of a business rival to save the company. I tried to picture him in those days, a younger Earl McAllister, backed into a corner, forced to make a horrific decision. I couldn't justify his actions, but I couldn't help feeling heartbroken knowing he spent his final years under the coercion of his own son and grandson. My father, Dean, and my brother, Troy. They not only knew about Grandpa's crime, but used it to manipulate him, forcing him to draft a will that gave them everything. What disgusted me even more were their current crimes: money laundering, embezzlement, and misusing company assets. The documents in my backpack were undeniable proof: forged contracts, manipulated ledgers, emails with shady partners. I could picture Troy's smug grin as he mocked me at the will reading, or my father's cold stare when he told me not to dream of a share of the inheritance. They thought they'd won, that I was just a failure not worth their attention. But now, I held the power to destroy them. I pulled over on a quiet road, turned off the engine, and closed my eyes. The biggest question echoed in my mind: what should I do? Part of me wanted to tear it all down, take this evidence to the authorities, let the FBI or IRS expose my father and Troy's true faces. They deserved to pay for what they did to Grandpa, to the company, and to our family. But another part of me hesitated. If I revealed the truth, it wouldn't just bring down my father and Troy. Grandpa's reputation, the man who built the McAllister empire from nothing, would be tarnished. His crime, though decades old, would be dredged up fodder for the press and public. He'd be remembered as a killer, not the kind grandfather who taught me to fish and build a fire. I opened my eyes, glancing at the backpack. Grandpa's handwritten will was inside, its shaky script filled with determination. He wanted me to be his heir, not for the money, but because he believed I'd do the right thing. But what was the right thing? I thought of his words. The truth is always worth it, no matter how much it hurts. But was this truth worth sacrificing his honor? Worth destroying the family? I drove back to the hotel, my mind a mess. That night I didn't sleep. I spread the documents across the table, rereading every journal page, replaying every tape. I thought about my mother, who left the family when I was young. She couldn't bear the pressure of being a McAllister, the power struggles, the pretense. Before she left, she told me, "Colton, don't let them turn you into someone you don't want to be." I'd followed her advice, leaving Colorado for a simple life in Berlin. But now I was being pulled back, caught between loyalty to my family and loyalty to myself. The next morning, I sat in a small cafe near the hotel, watching people pass by on the street. I ordered a black coffee, but it grew cold on the table as I didn't drink. I opened Grandpa's journal, rereading his final words. "Colton, I know you'll face a difficult choice. But remember, no one has the right to hold a man's past over him until he dies. If justice doesn't come from the law, it must at least come from you." Those words were like a flame, burning away my hesitation. I began to consider my next steps. If I exposed the evidence, my father and Troy would face criminal investigations. The company's shares would be frozen, the family's reputation would collapse, and the media would swoop in like vultures. But if I stayed silent, I'd let them continue living in their lies, their crimes unpunished. I thought of Grandpa, who lived his final years in torment, manipulated. He deserved to rest in peace, and the truth he left behind deserved to be heard. I picked up my phone and searched for a trustworthy lawyer in Denver. I found one named James, an experienced attorney. I called his firm and said I needed advice on a sensitive legal matter. James agreed to meet me the next day. That night I returned to the cabin. I wanted to stay there, where I felt closest to Grandpa. I sat in the armchair, opening his final journal. He wrote about me, about our summers here, about his belief that I'd do the right thing. "You're not like Dean or Troy," he wrote. "You have the heart of a truth seeker. Don't be afraid, Colton. Whatever you choose, I'm with you." I cried. For the first time since his death, I let the tears fall, not out of grief, but because I realized I could no longer run. I had to face the truth, no matter how painful. The next morning, I drove to the lawyer's office in Denver, carrying the backpack with all the evidence. James was a man with salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes. I told him everything about the will, Grandpa's crime, and what my father and Troy had done. James listened without interrupting, taking careful notes. When I handed him the documents and tapes, he looked at me, his voice serious. "Colton, are you sure about this? Once we send these to the authorities, there's no going back." "I'm sure," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "This is what Grandpa wanted, and it's what I have to do." James nodded, promising to contact his connections at the FBI and IRS. He said it would take time to prepare a case, but the evidence was strong enough to launch a criminal investigation. I left his office feeling like a weight had been lifted, but also like I was stepping into a storm. I drove away from Denver, the afternoon sun streaming through the windshield, making me squint. The road back to Aspen felt familiar yet alien, as if I were no longer the Colton McAllister who left 12 years ago. In the backpack on the passenger seat, the documents, cassette tapes, and Grandpa's handwritten will seemed to whisper, reminding me that I had set something in motion that couldn't be stopped. I had chosen the path of truth, but I knew the cost would be steep, not just for my father and Troy, but for the entire McAllister family and perhaps for me. 2 weeks later, James called. His voice over the phone was calm but carried an urgency he couldn't hide. "Colton, we've filed the case with the federal court. I've contacted a friend at the FBI and they're launching a criminal investigation into your father and brother. The evidence you provided, especially the tapes and accounting records, is irrefutable. They'll soon summon Dean and Troy for questioning." I sat on a chair in the small hotel room, gripping the phone tightly. "What about the handwritten will?" I asked. James sighed. "It's more complicated. Since it's not notarized, it doesn't have immediate legal standing. But we'll use it to prove the official will was coerced. The recordings of your father and brother's threats are key. If the court accepts, the handwritten will could be recognized as your grandfather's true intent." I nodded, though he couldn't see. "Thank you, James. Do what needs to be done." A few days later, news of the lawsuit began to leak. An article in the Denver Post was headlined, "McAllister Empire Crumbles, Allegations of Money Laundering and Coerced Will." I wasn't surprised the media jumped on it so quickly. The McAllister family was an icon in Colorado, and any crack in our polished facade was prime fodder for the press. The article didn't mention my name, but I knew it wouldn't be long before they discovered I was behind the lawsuit. The McAllister Corporation's shares were frozen soon after the FBI opened its investigation. Business partners began pulling out, major contracts stalled, and the company's stock plummeted on the exchange. I read angry tweets on X where people called my family hypocrites and greedy crooks. Part of me wanted to flee back to Berlin to hide in my small apartment and forget everything, but I couldn't. I had gone too far to turn back. A week later, I got a call from my father. His voice over the phone lacked its usual cold arrogance. Instead, it was tinged with panic. "Colton, we need to talk. Now. At the estate. The whole family will be there." I knew this meeting was inevitable. I drove to the McAllister estate where I had last been for Grandpa's funeral. This time, there were no lilies or hollow eulogies. The air in the mansion was heavy, as if the entire building was bracing for the coming storm. As I entered the grand living room, all eyes turned to me. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and others I vaguely recognized from long-ago lavish parties. My father sat at the head of the table, his hair disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. Troy leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Sit down, Colton," my father said, his voice trembling, stripped of its usual authority. I pulled out a chair and sat, keeping my face calm despite my racing heart. "What is this, Colton?" Troy spoke first, his voice a growl. "Who do you think you are, trying to tear down the family? You think you can destroy everything over some pathetic will?" "It's not a pathetic will," I replied evenly. "It's Grandpa's final wish. And what you've done, forcing him to sign the will, laundering money, embezzling, you can't hide it forever." My father slammed the table, making the wine glass in front of him rattle. "Are you trying to kill us all?" he shouted, his voice breaking. "Do you know what this will do? The company is collapsing. We'll lose everything, our wealth, our reputation, everything." "Why are you doing this, Colton? Out of hatred? Jealousy?" I looked straight into his eyes, feeling like I was staring at a stranger. "No," I said firmly. "I'm doing this for Grandpa, because he wanted the truth to come out. I'm doing this to return the truth to where it belongs." The room fell silent. An aunt, the one who mocked me at the will reading, spoke up, her voice trembling. "Colton, you can't do this. If you go through with it, the family will be ruined. Do you want us all on the streets?" I shook my head. "I don't want anyone on the streets, but I can't let what Grandpa left behind be buried. You forced him, threatened him, and now you have to take responsibility." Troy stepped forward, pointing at my face. "You think you're some saint? You're just a failure living in some European dump knowing nothing about this family. You have no right to judge us." "I'm not judging," I said, standing to meet his gaze. "I'm doing what Grandpa wanted. If you think money and power can hide the truth, you're wrong." I left the estate, ignoring the whispers and angry glares. On the drive back to the hotel, my phone buzzed incessantly. Texts from family members, some I hadn't spoken to in years. Some begged me to drop the lawsuit, others threatened me. I turned off the phone, feeling like I was walking a path with no way out. 4 days later, the first court hearing took place. James presented the case in federal court, submitting evidence that the official will was coerced. The tapes were played publicly, my father and Troy's voices echoing through the courtroom, stunning the audience. The judge ordered a temporary freeze on all McAllister Corporation assets to aid the investigation. My father and Troy were summoned for questioning, and the FBI began searching the company's Denver offices. The media exploded. Every day a new article appeared, digging into the McAllister family's details. The Aspen Times called it Colorado's biggest scandal in history. Reporters camped outside the estate trying to snap photos of my father and Troy. Some articles mentioned me, labeling me the disowned son returning for revenge. I didn't care what they wrote. I just wanted to finish what Grandpa started. But each night in the cold hotel room, I couldn't shake the loneliness. I had lost my family not because of the lawsuit, but because I realized I never truly belonged. I thought of Grandpa, our summers at the cabin, his smile as we fished by the stream. He believed in me and I was doing what he wanted. But why did I still feel empty? One morning, James called, his voice grave. "Colton, the FBI found more evidence in Troy's computer. The offshore transactions are bigger than we thought. Your father and brother could face prison time. You need to prepare yourself. This will drag on." I nodded, though he couldn't see. "Do what needs to be done, James." I hung up, staring out the window. Rain began to fall, droplets streaking down the glass, blurring Aspen's lights. I knew I had chosen correctly, but the cost of truth was heavier than I'd imagined. My father and Troy would lose everything: wealth, reputation, maybe even freedom. But I wasn't doing this to destroy them. I was doing it to free Grandpa, to let the truth he protected speak. I opened the backpack, pulled out Grandpa's journal and reread his final words. "Colton, you are my last hope." I closed my eyes, feeling as if he were here, his hand on my shoulder. "I'm doing the right thing, aren't I, Grandpa?" I whispered. There was no answer, but deep down I knew he would be smiling. The rain continued to fall outside the window, droplets sliding down the glass as if washing away the fragments of the McAllister family. I sat in the small hotel room in Aspen, Grandpa's journal open on the table next to a cold cup of coffee. 3 months had passed since I handed the documents to James, and everything had changed, not just for my father and Troy, but for me. The lawsuit was still ongoing, but what I had set in motion had shaken Colorado to its core. The McAllister empire, once a symbol of wealth and power, was now the centerpiece of sensational headlines and federal investigations. The final hearing took place on a chilly autumn morning. I sat in the back row of the federal courtroom in Denver, trying to avoid attention. My father and Troy sat at the front with their high-priced legal team. They didn't look at me, but I could sense their tension in every movement. My father's shoulders rigid, Troy's hands clenched as if trying to crush something. James, with formidable calm, presented the evidence. The tapes of my father and Troy threatening Grandpa, the forged accounting records and emails proving money laundering. But the centerpiece of the hearing was Grandpa's handwritten will, which, though not notarized, James used to prove the official will was coerced. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes, listened intently. When James played the final tape, my father's cold threat to expose Grandpa's crime, the courtroom fell silent. I saw my father's shoulders slump, as if he knew there was no escape. Troy was different. He maintained a defiant expression, but his eyes were lost, searching for a non-existent way out. After 3 hours of deliberation, the judge delivered a preliminary ruling. The official will was declared invalid due to clear evidence of coercion. Grandpa's handwritten will was recognized as his true intent, and I, Colton McAllister, was confirmed as the legal heir to his entire estate, including shares in the McAllister Corporation and all properties. The company's shares remained frozen while the FBI continued investigating my father and Troy for criminal charges, money laundering, embezzlement, and misuse of company assets. The judge ordered them not to leave Colorado until a final ruling. As I left the courtroom, I felt eyes on me, not just from lawyers and reporters, but from strangers outside. Some whispered, some snapped photos. I heard someone call me a family traitor, but I didn't care. I had done what Grandpa wanted. I had returned the truth to its rightful place. But this victory didn't bring the joy I expected. Driving back to Aspen, my mind was heavy. I thought of my father, his desperate look in the courtroom. I thought of Troy, once my brother, now a stranger. I thought of my mother, who left to escape this family's pretense. And above all, I thought of Grandpa, who placed his final trust in me, knowing the truth he left could destroy everything. I decided to return to the cabin one last time before leaving Colorado. When I pushed open the door, the smell of old wood and dust hit me, but this time, the cabin no longer felt mysterious. It was just a place holding memories of me, of Grandpa, and of summers long gone. I sat in the armchair, looking out the window where the pines shimmered in the autumn sunlight. I opened Grandpa's final journal, rereading his words. Colton, you are my last hope, not because you're perfect, but because you dare to face the truth. I closed my eyes, letting memories of Grandpa flood back. I saw him on the porch, telling stories of his youth, his mistakes, and his triumphs. He never wanted me to be a copy of him, my father, or Troy. He wanted me to be myself, a man who lived for the truth no matter the cost. A few weeks after the preliminary ruling, when the freeze on the company shares was lifted following confirmation of my legal inheritance, I began sorting through Grandpa's estate. I sold most of the McAllister Corporation shares, not because I didn't want to keep them, but because I knew the company was tainted by what my father and Troy had done. The proceeds, nearly $100 million, went into establishing a foundation in Grandpa's name, the Earl McAllister Foundation. It supports young entrepreneurs with honest projects, those who want to build a future with integrity and passion. I wanted Grandpa's legacy to be more than money, a message that truth and honesty are always worth it, no matter how hard the path. The cabin I decided to keep, not to live in, but as a memorial to Grandpa. I renovated it, preserving the old items, the wooden table, the armchair, the landscape painting, but added a small plaque by the door. Home of Earl McAllister, where truth was kept. Each time I stepped inside, I felt him there, smiling, as if he knew I had done the right thing. I didn't return to Berlin immediately. I stayed in Colorado a few more months working with James to ensure the foundation ran smoothly. My father and Troy were still facing the criminal investigation, and I knew it could take years for a final ruling. Part of me hoped they'd find a way to atone, though I knew it was unlikely. I didn't see them again or receive any more calls or messages from the family. They might see me as an enemy, but I had no regrets. I had chosen my path, the one Grandpa had laid out. One afternoon, standing outside the cabin, watching the sunlight filter through the pines, I received a letter. No sender, just a plain white envelope with unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a brief note. "Thank you, Colton. Your grandfather would be proud." I didn't know who sent it, maybe a distant relative, a former company employee, or a stranger who read the story in the news. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I knew I had done right. I left Colorado on a cold winter day carrying the backpack with Grandpa's journals. I didn't know what the future held, whether I'd find the peace I once had in Berlin. But I knew one thing. The truth Grandpa left wasn't just documents or tapes. It was the lesson he taught me, that a man is defined by his choices and that truth, however painful, is always the guiding light. As the plane took off, I looked down at Colorado's snow-covered mountains where I grew up, where I lost and found myself. I whispered as if Grandpa could hear, "Thank you, Grandpa. I did it."